Hey everyone, it's Friday, March 17th. Let's talk PlayStation. Recording this one much earlier than I normally do, as you can clearly tell by the amount of natural light coming into the room. A window's right here. I normally do this thing like in the middle of the night. You all know that, but we are going to talk some PlayStation news stories. But that's just to let you know, if some big news story breaks out and I'm not talking about it, that's why. Recording this a little early. Stop right there, Ryan. Actually, that's kind of a perfect place to stop at. We'll go with that right there. Like I had just mentioned that, hey, if I'm not talking about something, it's because it's recorded early, so I was editing this episode, and some news story actually did broke out. And apparently, it's that PlayStation 3 production is halting in Japan. There's only one model currently available in Japan. It's the 500GB model. And this is from Gematsu right now that says, if you go to the official Japanese website, and you go to the suggested retail price, this is that scheduled completion coming soon, which means shipments are probably going to be halted. So this is right off the heels. This is very recent. As I'm doing this right now, probably more news stories will come out, or maybe Sony will officially respond by the time this goes up Friday morning. But just to acknowledge it right here, it looks like this may be the slow, creeping, beginning death of PlayStation 3 finally going its way out the door. Now, sales have certainly slowed down for the system very much. They don't sell, you know, when we do the predictions video or whatever, when we get to the sales portion, I mean, PS3 goes up hardly nothing every single year. People just aren't buying them anymore, so the system really was due for this at some point. I would have given it another year, so I feel like it's a little, well, not too soon. It makes sense. But it's also worth noting that Sony will probably easily support PlayStation Network on PS3 for at least another 5-10 years, if that. Just manufacturing of the system is going to be halted. But anyway, we'll continue with the rest of the video. Anyway, first news story. Nothing too spectacular, but there's this new, like, sort of billboard advertisement in Spain for the new God of War, and I just thought it looked really cool. The actual imagery looks pretty dope, and if you actually translate it, it says, "My dad's better than your dad." So it looks pretty cool. Now, this advertisement seems a bit early because we don't have a release date for the game, but maybe this tells us a release date announcement is coming relatively soon, but a lot of signs are pointing to it being 2018, so like I said, it seems kind of early, but either way, I just think the imagery looks so cool with Atreus and Kratos right there. Standing next to each other looking angry as all hell. In the interest of PlayStation Plus finally doing something relatively cool, it's always noteworthy when something like this happens. So David Jaffe's Drawn to Death. We don't really talk about this game all that much, but Drawn to Death is due for April 4th. It was originally going to be free to play. Then they announced that it's going to be a $20 premium title that you download, and now it has just recently been announced that in April it's actually going to be a PlayStation Plus game. So it's not often we get a brand new game immediately available on PlayStation Plus, but that is going to be the case for Drawn to Death, which is pretty awesome. So whether you do or do not care about Drawn to Death, it's always sort of a nice surprise that a brand new game launches exclusively on PS Plus for free. So right away, immediately, you can jump right into it without any sort of greater commitment. Although it's funny because the game was originally free to play anyway, so a lot of people had this mindset of like, okay, the game's going to be, you know, free right away. However, you also have to figure when they go from free to play to a premium paid title means that you would assume drastically sort of change the dynamic of how they were going to make money in the game to begin with if it was going to be free to play. But since they're now charging up front, you would assume that you'd get a decent amount of content right off the bat, and now you get that, and you get the best of both worlds more or less, because now the game's going to be free with PS Plus, and it's still considered a premium title. Now let's move on to Horizon Zero Dawn. Some pretty good news here if you did not know. Sony recently announced that the game did very well on PlayStation 4 in terms of sales. 2.6 million copies sold as of March 12th. That's ridiculously awesome. This actually places Horizon Zero Dawn as the best brand new IP debut on PlayStation 4, and Guerrilla's best complete debut for a game as well, so that's fantastic news. The game's managing director Herman Hulse was quick to announce that they're already working on expansion story deal. Well, I don't know if it's DLC, but you would assume it is going to be DLC, but an expansion of the game's original story. The team's quick at work on that, which is great. I would certainly like to play even more of this game. I'm still working my way through it. I'm almost done, and the review for the game will be posted shortly, but yeah, awesome news. I mean, there's nothing better than having a big multi-million-dollar new IP do very well, because that's what we want. We want new IP, we want developers to flex their muscles, try something different. While it's great to have another Uncharted, or even for some people that are still into Killzone, another Killzone game, that's all well and good, but new IPs are awesome. That's what breathes life into the industry, and certainly it's great when you have like I mentioned, the multi-million-dollar ones, because realistically, you do get a lot of brand new IP from a lot of smaller developers, independent developers, but those are lower budget games, and if those aren't your thing, that's fine. That's why it's great when we have big publishers like Sony backing new ideas like this. Now, really, our big news story for the week, the main talking point we're going to be getting to, we're talking a lot about PlayStation Now, and now we have an even greater reason to talk about it with the polarizing announcement that PlayStation 4 games are going to be added to the service. It's going to be added to PlayStation Now. It's still going to be one subscription price, but now you've got a PS3 catalog of 483 games currently, and they're going to be adding PS4 games to that catalog relatively soon. They didn't announce necessarily when, but they will be starting a private beta rolling out within the coming weeks to people that already have a subscription. So if you do have a PlayStation Now subscription currently, basically Sony's saying keep an eye on your emails, and you might be invited into the program to stream PS4 games to PlayStation Now. So now that's what I'm saying immediately. This seems like a very polarizing announcement. There's a lot of things to kind of look at and discuss here, because this means a few things. One thing being that this now means that well, let's go back a little bit, because before the announcement was that they were halting the service for PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, Sony Bravia TVs. PlayStation Now is basically done on that. So this actually, that sort of announcement gives some nice perspective of this announcement, because now that means you won't be able to stream PS4 games to a PS3. That would kind of make sense there, and then Vita as well, Bravia TVs, and I still think there's obviously some good relevance to what we talked about back then, which is that those platforms probably had extremely low numbers for PlayStation Now. You'd have to imagine that Sony it just didn't make sense resource-wise to keep putting into those platforms when, who is using a Sony Bravia TV to stream PlayStation Now games? Probably nobody. Same with Vita. You have to figure hardcore Vita owners really aren't doing that. They're probably buying Vita games, as they often do. But that still kind of gives some decent perspective there. But the other thing that we kind of look at here is that now this means the two remaining platforms for PlayStation Now, which is PS4 and PC. Now PC players will be able to have access to PlayStation 4 exclusives, presumably if Sony will be adding PlayStation 4 exclusives to PlayStation Now. They didn't necessarily detail what titles are going to be on the service. All we know is PS4 games are coming to some capacity, but this means that if Sony were to add games like Uncharted 4, The Order 1886, Infamous Second Son, Little Big Planet 3, the recent release of Horizon Zero Dawn, Until Dawn, these games are going to be now available to people that exclusively play on PC. And it's funny, in the recent years of what Microsoft is doing and now what Sony is doing, it seems like the number one people that are gaining from a lot of these announcements are PC players, and that's all well and good. I've always said that there's no problem with PlayStation Now being on PC. It's still on Sony's terms. It's still Sony getting the money for it, and that's kind of what they want. They want the ball to be in their court. They want more people to have access to these titles, but at the same time, if they're not going to make a hardware sale out of somebody that games on a PC, they can still make a software sale on them by having a PC gamer join PlayStation Now as a subscription price. It's still on Sony's terms. If you want to get super technical about it, a PC player is still going to be playing on a PlayStation 4 because it's from a remote server where the game is being played on PlayStation hardware. But that's kind of silly. But either way, it's Sony's terms, so they're still getting the money, and that's what they want. They're a big business. They want income, and they still have a lot invested into PlayStation Now. Now, it's still what I always say about PlayStation Now. It's too far ahead of its time. It's a polarizing announcement because, well, initially my thought when I saw this announcement was too soon. This is way too soon. It would make a lot more sense, I think, if Sony launched their next major hardware release, which would be PlayStation 5, you'd assume, and then add PS4 support. If anything, I would have figured that they'd add PS1 and PS2 games before PS4 games. So I feel like it's a little too soon. Add PS4 games when you release your next set of hardware, PS5, then that gives, then let people that had refused to buy PlayStation hardware, then give them the option to finally play some great PS4 games, which that would be PC gamers. But that's all well and good anyway. Like I said, it's still on Sony's terms. Doesn't really matter. But it seems too soon. Even more so because with the recent announcement of Xbox Game Pass and kind of how they're doing, straight up, you download those games directly to the console. It's not a streaming service, and it's a rotating catalog rather than a consistent catalog of titles. Now you've got a situation where Sony where that was streaming in just PS3 games, that's what I was talking about. You can't, it's not really a great comparison of the two. One's streaming last-gen games, one's a rotating catalog of smaller titles, that's 360 and Xbox One, that are straight downloaded to the system. Now you've got a situation where Sony's adding PS4 games, so maybe there's a little bit of parity there where you can make a comparison, but even still, it doesn't totally add up. And what makes it even more of a totally not adding up situation, if I can sort of put it that way, is you already have a very vocal amount of people, and you'd have to figure it's even the people that aren't vocal, because Sony never talks numbers about PlayStation Now. They never gloat about how many subscribers there are on the service. That tells you they're probably not great numbers. You already have this amount of people that don't like PlayStation Now and what it stands for. That's why I say it is too soon. People don't want to stream games. And more specifically, the only redeeming value of PlayStation Now is the fact that you have complete immediacy to the game, so you're not downloading them, you can play them right away. And the other benefit is they're PS3 games that you can't access on a PS4. You can play a PS3 game on a PS4 through PS Now. That's the only redeeming value. So to add PS4 games to it, now you have now this is an availability of native games. These are games that you can go out and already buy physical or download digital. It just doesn't, like I said, there's just not, it doesn't really add up, you know? Not entirely sure why Sony felt the need to do it now. Maybe it strictly was in sort of the idea of trying to access the PC consumer base and have those people just, you know, stream PS4 exclusives and get subscription numbers that way. You know, I'm not sure. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's a polarizing announcement, and it's too soon. Why do I keep saying it's too soon? Because I think PlayStation Now would still make way more sense 5 to 10 years from now. And here's why. A lot of people still don't seem to get it. Let me put it into some sort of perspective here. If I were to say right now there's a movie download service like Xbox Game Pass, nobody would want that. Nobody wants to download movie per movie. Maybe some people, maybe there's a small subset, a vocal minority that would enjoy that, but most people would probably say that sounds really dumb. I just want to go on Netflix or Hulu and just boom, right then and there I can start watching it. Nobody would want to do that, right? Granted, Netflix just recently added, they did add offline viewing or whatever, where you can download the movie, but that was a feature that they took a very long time to add, and let's face it, the vast majority of people using Netflix are still going to be streaming their content. They're not going to use that offline feature. So most people would probably agree, I would not use a service where I had to download the movies instead of stream them. Relate that to games. Now, yes, obviously in today's age, people prefer to and it's a much different conversation because games are all about the latency. You need the game to be fluid and perfect because you're actually controlling it and you're trying to have an interaction with the gameplay and whatnot. There's no reason to discuss why it's different from a movie streaming service, but to add some sort of perspective, think 10 years from now when it isn't necessarily a big problem with the internet and there is greater availability of it, and Sony does double down on making the service that much better than it currently is, the value starts to add up. Then you've got the same sort of idea of Netflix and Hulu today. $10 a month, $12 a month, whatever it's going to be priced 10 years from now. You have to imagine it probably goes up in price. But, you know, $15, $20 a month, it starts to make a lot of sense. At that point, we will be in a place where people probably would prefer to do that over downloading, absurd amount of gigabytes over the internet, like 15, 20 gigabytes for a game. Games are probably only going to get larger in the future. And the PlayStation Now at that point, you would also assume, would have an even larger catalog. And who knows if Sony will add PS1 and PS2 games to it at some point. And I'm in the same boat as everybody else. I don't want to stream my games right now. And I still probably wouldn't in the future either, because you guys know I have a shelf full of games. I like collecting my games. I love physical games. But I'm just being objective here and saying it makes a whole lot of sense later. But people still don't like it now. So that's why this is such an odd announcement to me. Why PS4 games now? Is this to just get more subscriptions via PC or something? People are very vocal about it. The message is pretty clear. They don't want PlayStation Now currently. And they keep asking for backwards compatibility, which is, I still can't believe so many people are fucking ignorant about that. It's not going to happen. You can't even fucking emulate PS3 games on a extremely powerful PC. It ain't gonna happen, and it's not because Sony's trying to fuck you, it's because they literally can't do it. Another rant there. If you're watching this show and then you're frequent commenter on IGN or other YouTube videos or something, fucking educate people. It can't be done because it actually can't be done, probably. Or it would be just an absurd amount of time, effort, and money, and it wouldn't even be remotely worth it for Sony to attempt to even make it work. There's very little success today for emulating on PC. It ain't gonna happen on PS4, which is marginally, you know, less powerful than a capable PC to try to attempt to emulate a PS3 game. It ain't gonna happen. Kudos to Microsoft for making it work, but they had it set up in a much more easier sort of fashion with their architecture of the 360 and moving on to the One. Anyway, yeah, it's an odd announcement. We'll see how it pans out, but it's just going to be the same situation where people don't want PlayStation Now. Sony's never going to talk about numbers because people are still not subscribing to the service, but they're still going to double down because they are confident that they will be in a place where they are happy that they did what they did, I'm well sure that's how happy Netflix was when they started to do their service, you know, much sooner than they needed to. And same with any other company that tried to push new technology when, you know, now wasn't the time and it was too expensive for consumers and consumers didn't want it. At some point it starts to make sense, and that's what Sony's banking on currently. Those are just some of the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week, and that's all I got for you. Horizon review will be here shortly. I'm almost done with the game, and I'll start working on that very soon. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you guys next Friday.